Even though all of us rely on banks every day in all sorts of ways, many of us also dislike them. And that makes banks a handy target for politicians who need to find a point of connection with the public. The second budget of Treasurer Scott Morrison is seeking to do just that and inject some money into his cash-strapped budget with a $1.5 billion levy on bank liabilities. The banks are already warning that the tax will ultimately be borne by shareholders and customers. The government's hoping to win broad support for another new tax as well, an increase in the Medicare levy, quarantine, to go towards funding the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Here's 7:30's political correspondent Andrew Probyn with his analysis.
Giving Australians the security and the opportunity in a fair budget. Got to get the priorities right. Scott's done a great job.
Thanks, Prime Minister.
The morning after, the night before.
So who's up first?
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
This budget is fair, Mark. It's fair at every level.
She's here, you can take a break.
And the question before the nation, when is a tax not a tax? When it's a levy, of course.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
Levies like this are common right around the world. This is a very conventional approach.
This levy has one job and one job only, and that's to fully fund the National Disability Insurance Scheme once and for all.
This is a government who's increasing everyone's taxes so they can give tax cuts to millionaires and proceed with a $50 billion corporate tax cut.
That's what you want to do.
If Scott Morrison's budget answers anything, it's that the coalition now recognises there's a spending and a revenue problem.
The gap between revenues and expenditures could never have been completely closed purely by cutting spending. Increases in revenue always had to play a role in that.
To that end, the government will pick the pockets of almost every worker, the 5 biggest banks and companies with foreign workers. And to win support for its new imposts, the government has set about deploying different tactics. There was the appeal to warm hearts.
I think Australians are fair-minded about the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I think they know this is a scheme where we're helping out our mates.
Good morning.
And then an appeal to darker instincts and age-old resentments.
Look, the banks are they're among the most profitable banks in the world, $32 billion of profits. They benefit from the implicit support of the government. That's a major benefit that they have. It's only fair that they pay this levy to help bring the budget back into balance.
The coalition's focus on fairness is designed to ensure the Tony Abbott-era 2014 budget is dead, buried and cremated.
From a political standpoint, putting the greatest amount of distance possible between this government and its predecessor, between this budget and the signature budget of the Abbott government, and also closing down most of Labor's lines of attacks on the government, it's a very clever budget politically.
If budgets are like automotive tune-ups, this one was a complete engine strip down. The Liberal jalopy got comfy new suspension and a change in Duco, from Abbott Blue to Turnbull Orange. In the name of pragmatism, the coalition's done things once anathema to the Liberal Party ethos. What government MPs are privately calling a political budget for the times is actually an equal opportunity cash grab that is unashamedly populist, courtesy of its raid on the big banks. It might even work for Malcolm Turnbull. After all, who will cry river over them?
Well, bank bashing has become an Australian pastime.
The mood on the streets suggests the Banking Association's new head, former Queensland Labor Premier Anna Bligh, is on the money.
Love it. About bloody time. That is one I did see. I thought, yep, that's about due. Record profits every year. Why not hit them? They're loaded.
High time they did that, and especially the big 4 banks, high time they paid more taxes, so absolutely.
I don't think it's unreasonable to ask them for more. They're certainly making profit from us.
It is a simple, naked grab for money to fill a budget hole, and it's being taken from one part of the business community for one reason. The government believes that right now banks are an easy target. Banks aren't going to lie down and be treated like a political scapegoat for the populist convenience of a government that needs to fill a budget hole.
With big bank CEOs warning that extra costs would be borne by customers and shareholders, the government could soon be hit with a campaign similar to the one Labor faced over its mining tax.
So who'll be hurt by this super tax? Everyone.
There's no such thing as a tax that can be absorbed. Taxes have to be paid.
Give me a break. That's what Australians will be saying. And with great respect to the bank that's in the room, families absorb costs. Small businesses absorb costs.
There are only really three sources. It either comes from borrowers, savers or shareholders. And the major shareholders in banks are Australian mums and dads.
Don't do it. They already don't like you very much. They don't like us as politicians universally that much either. So we understand your pain. But prove them wrong on this occasion. Prove them wrong. Don't confirm their worst impressions. Tell them another story. Tell them you'll pony up and you'll help fix the budget.
Labor's questions in Parliament today showed where Bill Shorten will go in his budget response tomorrow night.
Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. How is it fair that a millionaire will receive a $16,400 tax cut while every other Australian has to pay more tax?
How is it fair to promise parents of disabled children that there is a national disability insurance scheme and never fund it? You never put the money in place, dripping with empathy, hypocrites to the last degree.
Labor will support the bank levy and would look flint-hearted if it didn't also back an increase to the Medicare levy to fully fund the NDIS. These would be significant wins for Malcolm Turnbull, but there will be another measure of the budget's political success. Bill Shorten saw Tony Abbott to his prime ministerial grave, and with every bad poll, Malcolm Turnbull gets closer to his own. If this centrist, populist and big taxing budget reminds the Labor leader of his political mortality, it will have served its unspoken purpose.
Next election.
Going into the budget, the government's been under huge pressure to do something on housing affordability. Last night, Scott Morrison announced various measures he claims will put downward pressure on prices, including helping first-home buyers save for a deposit, incentives for older Australians to downsize, and restrictions on foreign investors. But will the plan work? Julia Holman takes a look.
Do you want to get the tacos out? Do you want guac on yours?
Yeah, thanks.
Bree Ma and Tom Quinn live in this converted garage behind Tom's mother's house in Camperdown, in the heart of Sydney. Tom, who's a builder, and Bree, who works in marketing, live on a shoestring budget while they're saving for a place of their own.
The closer we get, it feels like the target moves further away. So we do feel like we're getting closer, but then we look at what's been selling around us and it feels like a pipe dream, really.
Yeah, we'd like something a little bit bigger.
You don't like living with your mum and your parents and your mother-in-law?
Yeah.
No, living with mum's great.
Jeannie's great, but yeah, we do crave our own space, or even if we have an argument, just like a door that I could slam would be great to another room.
Hopefully it'll be better after tonight.
The Treasurer's buzzwords for this year are fairness, opportunity and security.
For those who are trying to save to buy their first home, we will support them providing a tax cut on their first home deposit savings.
The government's plan to help first home buyers is to allow them to put a maximum of $30,000 each into their super fund above the minimum contribution.
Relative to the deposit that most people in Melbourne or Sydney would pay, it wouldn't even really come close to that amount.
It wouldn't even cover your stamp duty.
I commend the Turnbull government's plan, this budget and this bill to the House.
So you guys had kind of low expectations going in to the speech. How would you say that, have those low expectations been met?
Pretty much, yeah.
Probably even lower than I thought, actually.
While these wannabe first home buyers feel there's not much in this year's budget for them, older Australians are getting a financial incentive to downsize.
So we've got a beautiful downsizer property targeted at the over 55s market, 5 freestanding homes. These range in price starting just under the $2 million mark. Just wanted to double check this here, mate.
This development in Sydney's North Shore is exclusively for the over 55s.
People very much want to stay in their neighbourhoods where their doctors are, their dentists, their friends. When downsizers are looking at the cost of moving, with the cost of selling, real estate agent cost, then the purchasing component to that, and the stamp duty component, I think that's a big impediment.
Treasurer Scott Morrison announced that people aged 65 and over who sell their family home to downsize into properties like these can put up to $300,000 of the proceeds straight into their superannuation. And if you're a couple, that's doubled to $600,000.
The pricing of selling your family home and getting into a development like this, there's not often a lot of changeover money left. So the downsizers have been staying put, not moving, and just saying, you know, we'll be here for another 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So I'm really hopeful and confident that these changes that have been made will now start stimulating this end of the market.
The downsizing measure is primarily a giveaway to rich retirees. Its impact on the number of people who downsize will be very small. We know from the evidence that the primary reasons why people decide not to move are emotional. They don't want to move away from the house that's got all of the memories. So in practice, this is a measure that's going to go to people who are going to downsize anyway.
If we came here at night time, there will probably be a lot of apartments where there's a good proportion of the apartment with the lights off.
The government has pledged to crack down on vacant properties, putting a levy of at least $5,000 on vacant homes owned by foreign investors. Property researcher Catherine Cashmore says there's thousands of empty properties in the Melbourne CBD.
In the last report we did, we found around 80,000 that are potentially vacant over a 12-month period. If you're using Melbourne as a benchmark, then I would imagine this is a phenomenal problem nationally. It's hopeful that the $5,000 levy on empty property will bring more properties onto the market, but the levy is pretty low, so whether there will be some investors that will decide to take the hit of the levy rather than rent their property out, that's a possibility also.
Other changes will affect foreign investors. New developments will now have to be at least 50% Australian owned.
It's important that our real estate and our premium urban land is utilised for the domestic market, so that is a good policy to have. That means that a proportion of properties that are built have to be sold to the domestic market, and when we have buyers that are trying to get into the market and they can't, and we have a lot of people talking about a lack of supply, then that has to be a good thing.
I think the Australian government keep changing the goalpost, and too many policies and too soon. So come up this, we have big living space here. And
Monica too sells high-end properties to buyers from China. But she believes despite the changes, it won't deter her clients.
They really want to be an Australian resident. They love the business environment here, love the school here. So they won't affect my buyers, but it will affect some of the investors.
So what the government's chosen to do is a number of things that are politically easy, but are not going to make any discernible difference to affordability.
Second call at 8:30.
The Grattan Institute's John Daly argues that this budget is only tinkering around the edges.
You'll need a scanning electron microscope to see an impact on prices. I can't see any reason why this budget is going to make a discernible difference to housing affordability, a discernible difference on the number of younger people that buy a house. If you haven't bought a house by 35, chances are it's unlikely to happen, and that's the world we're in, and this is unlikely to change it.
We're in our early 30s, we're not at the stage of having kids as yet, but we are in that age bracket. That will ultimately be delayed because as much as we love our little granny flat, that is not suitable for having a child in. Both Tom and I are degree qualified. We're working in professional jobs. We earn above the average income, and we are essentially living in a granny flat at Tom's mum's house to help accelerate our savings. And if we are struggling to get into the market, how is anyone able to do it?